Welcome to New Realities. Coming up is John Ramirez, ex-CIA agent, reaction to the congressional hearings on UAPs. But before I get to that, I just want to tell people about a very exciting upcoming series I'm producing with Deborah Giusti, which is the Making Contact series. It starts Thursday, May 19th. It's a free session, the first one. Go to makingcontact.com. We have such amazing people on the schedule for the whole series, which runs through June, such as Linda Moulton Howe, Whitley Strieber, Nick Pope, Danny Sheehan, Desiree and JJ Hertok, Adam Apollo, Mary Rodwell, and many, many more. Register at makingcontactseries.com.
Welcome, John. It's so great to have your expertise on this. And what an interesting day, right? The first time in 50 years that it's trickled down to the House and trickled down to us. And here it is being broadcast on YouTube. And John has been really interested in this his whole life. Once retired, he worked in the signal processing unit of the CIA, and he's been really understanding this from the inside, what department is not talking to what department, what research is being done. And he's also just really, been a supporter of citizens groups to really get down to a peaceful understanding of what's going on. So we're grateful to have him part of a community that's here talking about disclosure.
We're really honored to have you here today. And what did we see today, John? And what didn't we see? And why didn't we see what we were all hoping to see?
Well, am I being heard?
Yes, you sound good. Yes.
What we saw was an internal process hearing, because I got that internally within the intelligence community, especially on the military side of the intelligence community, there's been a lot of efforts to suppress information from the rank and file military to report what they see. So that's the stigma. It's not the stigma of us, we the people, of reporting. That might be addressed later. But for this, it's processed within the Department of Defense, because they're setting up this, I guess they're calling it AIMSOG. So I'll use that, AIMSOG, to allow military people, especially on the intelligence side, those that are forward deployed who are seeing these objects, to report these objects without having their careers impacted. And so with this AIMSOG process, the Congress wanted to make sure that that process is starting so that reports will come in, because a lot of folks have seen these objects in the military, and just like civilian airline pilots before, they didn't want their careers to be impacted. So a lot of this was process oriented from Congress as part of their oversight responsibilities. What do you have in place, and is there a mechanism to get data in? That's what you saw. It was not about anything to do with disseminating information or disclosing information about UAPs. And so if we're expecting that, that might happen in the future. One thing I would point out is that this was the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, and they are not bound by the NDAA. The NDAA oversight is the responsibility of the Armed Services Committees of both the House and the Senate. This is the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, which they produced the IAA, the Intelligence Authorization Act, and they have a 90-day reporting requirement to Congress. So this is the first of the 90 days, and 90 days from hence, now we should get another hearing. I'm encouraged that will be more frequent hearings, and it might open up these other topics later.
But you were formerly with the CIA. What is your background particularly?
Yes, I was a CIA officer. I started in signals intelligence, which was why I was interested in when one of the congressmen asked about these radio frequency emanations coming from these craft that were detected. That piqued my interest. And also, I served in an organization called the Office of Scientific and Weapons Research, OSWR, which later became WINPAC, Weapons Intelligence, Counterproliferation, and Arms Control. Now, those two are like one preceded the other. So OSWR was first in my career, and then WINPAC. These are the actual UFO study offices. When we study space objects or like true adversarial advanced aircraft capabilities, in the process of studying our day jobs, we started getting reporting from the field about UAPs and UFOs, including what was detected overseas. So we didn't look at what was inside the United States, which we're not allowed to. We were collecting data from China, from Russia, from Latin America, everywhere else in the world. They were, like, to your point, Alan, the entire world has been, reporting this. And so CIA looked at those kind of reports. And so I was in that office, just the sideline. Kit Green, who was in the Weird Desk, was in the predecessor, Office of Scientific Intelligence, and also he ended his career in the same office that I was in, the Office of Scientific and Weapons Research. So he had the Weird Desk associated with UFOs and all of that. So that was my background.
Wait, so the CIA knows that there are, I would say, craft from other worlds here, and why is it really national security, or is it protecting some other corporate interests or something that we're not hearing the truth here today? Or
I would say we know there are craft not associated with any terrestrial government. And I hesitate to say other worlds because a lot of us formers who are now coming out are stating that there are two types of hypotheses that we believe is happening. One is interdimensional, and the other is ultra-terrestrial. That is, there are beings here who actually were here before humans arrived, and they may have had some input into how we developed. And there are also the interdimensional aspect is there might be other elevated higher consciousness beings that don't need spacecraft to get here. And we have channelers and we have experiencers who also contact these entities, and whether they call themselves or self-identify as Arcturians or Pleiadians or whatever, they're not flesh and blood like beings like the ultra-terrestrials.
So are we ever going to hear that truth? Are we ever, is anyone ever going to say, guess what? Because what you said, either they're interdimensional, ultra-terrestrial, we're not talking about humans. And so are we ever going to get that from government, you think?
I don't know. That's the biggest question I have. Jim Semivan, myself, and Lou Elizondo, we kind of hint at, this is where we should be looking. And a lot of the remote viewers, that the military had also say that, there is a galactic federation. There is a world out there of these other beings who have some interest in us and how we develop as a species so that we don't destroy our planet. And because they're all ultra-terrestrials, we don't destroy them as well. So I don't know when that will happen, Alan, because that's a bridge that's hard to build from where we're at now to that. But those on the inside kind of know that, there's a program that kind of addresses that internally.
And I think it's actually, I think it will come out like, so we're already, because if you want to look at this stuff scientifically, we're actually developing body sensors and things like that that are alluding to these facts, So Joe Dispenza's actually just got super millions of dollars of funding, and they're showing how the blood changes during meditation. So, and our radio research that we've been doing with Jimmy Blanchett, and that, it's like, well, no one can explain how that's even possible. So I think our sensor technology is getting better, right? So it's not like, oh, I just had a telepathic thing. It's like, no, I'm getting a radio signal. And we're also, brain wearables are also picking up on we understand what thoughts are coming into someone's brain now. Like we can say, oh, they're thinking about a couch, so all this stuff is evolving. And I think that, I mean, I know that we're disappointed about what happened there on TV, on TV today, but I think what's interesting is the fact that it seems like this nested doll, right? It's like, so we know that millions and millions and billions of dollars probably has been spent over this in the last, whatever, 70 years, right? And none of them are, it's all classified, black budgeted, and no one's talking to anybody. But this is already trickled down to the House, you know what I mean? Who's more, representatives of the people that are, asking these questions and starting to, and the fact that they destigmatize, just like you said, John, the reporting within the government, that destigmatization, we cannot say that that's not a big deal. This is a huge deal, right? Because do you imagine the amount of dinner conversations that are happening now that never happened before, because this stuff is on, New York Times. So this is the kind of thing that invites this holistic picture. And it's important that us as citizens get our stuff together, get funded, get our data together, right? Because you cannot lie. And I mean, we're talking about statistics, like they're saying they have 400 reports, and they're still talking about threat, whatever, but nothing bad has happened. And if you look at the 200,000 reports, no one is being killed in like whatever, so this is the kind of thing we want: more data, we want more conversation. And so I'm excited that things are moving in this way. And we can't say that all government is bad. It's made up of people. And I, for one, would ask, just to, in closing, I, for one, would ask that everyone watching today send Mr. Gallagher on Twitter a thank you for asking the question, like, hey, how is it that you're running this important, committee, and you haven't even done research about what the, you know what I mean? Like the government has already been spending its money on. So these kinds of loops, these kinds of questions have to be asked. So Mr. Himes, Mr. Welts, Mr. LaHood, all those people showed up. There was no one, no one showed up, but some of them did, and they need to be thanked for doing that.
Right. No, good point, Zinka. But John, you also mentioned there's an internal committee that deals with this stuff that we're not hearing from. And one more question: do you think Elizondo will ever be called before Congress to talk about what he knows? So I'm curious what you're thinking.
I know for a fact that UFOs, UAPs, and higher consciousness especially are subjects of interest to CIA, especially higher consciousness. Mm-hmm. And it's not because we want to make contact with Arcturians or Pleiadians, because if you look at CIA's mission, its principal mission is to recruit foreign intelligence officers who know something happening in their government, recruiting foreign government officials who know what is happening within their government, and to think about how their mind works. What causes a person to essentially become a traitor to his or her country? Mm-hmm. What is the thought processes? Also, as a countermeasure, how can we tell if being truthful? And so a lot of the technology for determining that has been developed and is still being developed. And so there's a higher consciousness aspect. But in doing so, we've also encountered instances where our remote viewers, that program was created to, in the simplest term, project one's mind into an unknown area and report what they see. Mm-hmm. And so that was a spying mission, right? And in doing so, we also encountered like higher intelligences. We encountered, for lack of a better term, aliens, non-human entities.
Right.
The Galactic Federation, the fact that Mars was once habitable and had intelligent beings on it. So these other things came into the forefront as part of this remote viewing program. And when the Army had it, the Intelligence Security Command, they actually looked at, contacted Monroe at the Monroe Institute And they start looking at that gateway process. And there's a wonderful paper that was written about that process, of gateway. And so at least the Army and the CIA had a great interest in this. So there is a program, and it's always ongoing, but it's not like the actual, it's not totally UAP oriented at all, but a big basket where UAPs play a significant part. Now, within that program, there's a subset of folks working on this issue. And so the biggest hint is Jim Semivan. If you listen behind what he says, the words he says, he stated that, oh yes, I'm working with a small program. I'm working with a small group at CIA, and that is that group. So I can address that. And your second question is about Lou. Lou knows these things, but he is not a whistleblower. He is a private consultant to the Department of Defense, and he has clearances through the Department of Defense. So in many ways, he knows what's going on behind the scenes, but he doesn't report to the department as much as he reports to an organizing committee. It's not this AOI, MSG, or AIMSOG. It's another committee, which, for lack of a better term, people call it MJ12. But forget about the title or the names, because that might not exist anymore. But there is a committee who informs policymakers, the elected policymakers, the appointed policymakers about what's going on. Now, these two gentlemen who are witnesses, they're part of that process. But I keep seeing these control rods being held tightly in place, where they don't want that chain reaction to happen all at once. And they're just like releasing selectively here and there a little bit. And so what we heard, like I said before, was like, at least, they're looking at the process of how are we going to go forward with this in the future. But Lou knows a lot, and I agree, he should be a witness, as well as Chris Mellon, what they know, maybe Jim Semivan, what he knows, because these people still have clearances, are working within that program.
Well, Jim's had experiences. He's had contact experiences and stuff that he's been public about. But who's controlling this? Who's behind the scenes pulling the strings and saying, we're only going to say a little bit? There must be a massive structure in place. I mean, what do you think, John?
I don't think it's a massive structure. I really think it's a small committee. I call them the committee.
Oops.
I don't know who, but I mostly know what. And so the what part will be like people who are in academia, for example, select members of academia who might have been read onto certain aspects of the truth, as well as defense officials and intelligence officials in this program. And so their purpose is management. Now, what we saw in the NDAA, this AOI MSG, AIMSOG, is there's an executive committee for that, the AIMSOG Executive Committee. That is the public face of what's really going on behind the scenes. And so we're kind of like fed a little bit of the real truth, but it's like in bite-sized morsels. But what upsets me is that, well, I think most people can take the truth. We want the truth, and we can take it. We want to know the truth, and so what they're doing is mostly not for our benefit, but for internally, because there's a lot of resistance in the Pentagon going forward from this. There is a group that does not want any of this to come out, for whatever reasons, and some people cite personal religious beliefs, and they want to cast this as like demonology, that what we're seeing are entities that are demonic, satanic, and they actually firmly within themselves and their belief system hold that as truth, and they're in responsible positions. So they're the folks that Lou butts head against, that they're trying to like, don't talk about it. CIA side is a little more open. We're much more open. We're not as affected by that type of narrative. And so I wish CIA would be more forthcoming, but the only real spokesperson we have right now is Jim Semivan, and he is a former, not a current. But he knows what's going on, but he's limited to what he can say, and what he's doing is talking about his own personal experiences
Right.
as a way of like shining a light into that dark corner that, yeah, it's all about higher consciousness. This is why they're here. And so it's all about them wanting to elevate our consciousness, trying to make our ascension happen.
So isn't that a direct contradiction to what we're hearing here, national security threat and all that garbage that's in the way? I mean, can you explain why they keep going back to national security threat when what you're saying is higher consciousness, the exact opposite? Yeah, go ahead.
It's because this subcommittee, it's the C3 subcommittee, and we have to take a step back. And first of all, it's the House Permanent Subcommittee on Intelligence, C3. And what does that mean? Counterterrorism, counterintelligence, and counterproliferation. Mm-hmm. So they're interested in like terrorist activities around the world, and those activities targeting the U.S. Counterintelligence is hunting for spies within our own government. That's counterintelligence. And counterproliferation is weapons of mass destruction. Those are like threats. And so this committee's focus is always on threats. It's the wrong subcommittee to go to. That is the exact wrong one.
If we're going to talk about higher intelligence in a subcommittee, who would we talk to? Could we call the CIA? Or what do you think the best strategy? Because what we're all talking about here is getting disclosure, the fact that we are not alone in the universe, that there's other beings, and that, like you said, and I believe it, they're here for our evolution of our consciousness. So how do we get there?
I don't know. If I could get there, I'll be there. But I just want to add on to what I said. I was hoping that the first committee would be the Senate Armed Services Committee, Emerging Threats and Capabilities. Now, the word threats is in that subcommittee's title. The soul is capabilities. Now, who sits on that is Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona, who was a Navy fighter pilot who may have seen these objects himself. He also was a NASA astronaut who may have seen these objects out in space as a NASA astronaut, and who's also a member of that subcommittee. It's Senator Gillibrand, who was instrumental in at least getting that part of the legislation pushed through. So that I'm hoping that this isn't the only committee that's going to handle this for Congress. It should go into the Senate side, where it's chaired by Senator Mark Warner of Virginia, and the ranking member is Senator Marco Rubio from Florida. I was hoping that the intelligence, the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, will also hold hearings. They don't have a subcommittee structure. It's the whole committee. And we've heard from Marco Rubio before. He's keenly interested in this. And also, we heard from Senator Gillibrand. She's keenly interested in this, and she is like questioning people who are being appointed positions. What do you think about UAPs? And she questioned an NSA appointee. I don't know anything. Well, she said, well, you better find out. You better know about UAPs. So these are baby steps, Alan, and I don't know how to get from where we're at in these baby steps to higher consciousness. I'm hoping that the James Webb Space Telescope will see something out there that the government may already know that's out there. It could be a portal, some opening up in the sky that the sensors can see. And then it say, oh my gosh, look at what's coming through then. Mm-hmm. These portals, we need to study that and let government science kind of cue government intelligence saying we need to look there.
Well, Carolyn Corey's movie A Tear in the Sky actually shows a portal. Have you seen that film?
I've seen the trailer for it, but I haven't actually seen the entire entire movie. But interesting enough, Avril Haines, who did say the word extraterrestrially, they may be coming to us extraterrestrially, also said something very, very interesting. She said, when asked about, what's out there, she said, well, we'll have to wait for Bill Nelson's people to let us know. And Bill Nelson being the NASA administrator, what she was actually saying is, let NASA science find what's out there, which we already know what's out there, but let them be the ones to discover what's out there. And then that, because it's science, it becomes more palatable. Now, having said that, I think civilian science has really taken a big leap forward. We kind of like left government science behind because we're willing to go there. And the government scientists are not still hesitant to go there. So I applaud what Deborah has done with that movie, of the sensors that they use. You can imagine what the actual classified sensors can do. It's so much more, and they have the data. And that's what frustrated me about this hearing, is that they kind of pretended like, oh, I don't know, we still need to look at data. We're still collecting data. We didn't look at data from before, but they have it all.
Right. And you're right. When you say pretending, these guys we heard today they do know what we're trying to get to, what Zinc is working so hard at bringing to the people with, her light net and her organ. They don't you think they know, and they're just like stepping around the issue because they can't say the A word, the alien or ETs?
I think on the Department of Defense side, that's happening. Yeah, they just cannot go there yet. And they're just waiting for someone to cue them to go there, so then they can have a reason to do so that isn't like revealing, oh, we knew this all along. That's why I say I think NASA will lead the way, and they'll find something out there through NASA's research and their sensors that will then cue the intelligence community to go where they already knew where to go.
Right. I think there was some remorse in the opening comments of the secrecy that's been there. So it doesn't mean that the people that are there today agree that we should have been so secretive about the information. One of the things I wonder about is we're in a global world. So why aren't other governments revealing what they know? Like, what's going on here? And again, before you answer that, John, I just want to say, when we support these people, the Mark Kellys, the Mark Warners, the Marco Rubios, with emails, with calls, with tweets, that's telling them, keep going. We're supporting you in what you're doing, because there's obviously heroes inside the government, and we need to support them in the work that they're doing. And so, but yeah, back to my question is why aren't other governments talking about this?
I don't know, but I do know this. We do share information government to government, even our adversaries, what most people think are adversaries. Information sharing is happening about this. And especially with our allies, a lot of information sharing is happening. But I don't know why, they're not stating publicly, and I don't think it is a national security concern to say, yeah, we're talking to the Russians and the Chinese, we're talking to nations in Latin America and the Middle East and Europe, that all of this data is coming in. Why is that such a secret to not at least reveal the fact of, if they don't want to reveal the substance? They didn't even really allude to that, they kind of danced around it, and I don't know why they would do that.
So what's occurring to me is maybe they think that the people can't handle it, that the people are going to be super freaked out and panicked and oh my God, and it's going to cause some sort of pandemonium. Wouldn't that be hilarious? Because that's not what I think would happen. I think people already know about this. They already know, it's they're already 20 steps ahead of the government, party line or whatever. But I mean, do you think that's what could be stopping them?
No, it's not the individual people, like we the people. It's the government. The U.S. government is worried about institutions. They're worried about the impact that a full dissemination or disclosure would have on the mundane things of how this country runs. It's the stock market, it's religious belief systems, it's social economic, it's education, it's all of that. It's institutionally, that's what they want to preserve. And just making little forays into that so that these institutions are composed of us, people, and that if enough people are convinced and are able to handle the truth and they're in these institutions, then that will elevate the institutions as well. And so they're mindful of that impact as well. They just don't want to throw everything up in the air, which is they're still going with the Brookings Institute paper commissioned by the Eisenhower administration and delivered to the Kennedy administration about disclosing life out in space. And that Brookings Institute paper is still like the operating paper that the government uses, saying, oh, we can't do this yet. But
yeah, that's why, I mean, so much pressure like that's built up. And I think it's like, that's why we got to celebrate every single ratchet that's opening this jar, you know. It's like, okay, so we just passed one thing today, they're talking about it on live congressional here, you know. Then the next thing is what you said, the Senate hearing, and the next thing is the, you know, Newsweek, and the next thing is the whatever, you know. It's like we've got to march this all forward more quickly because the peace of our world depends on it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I also want to go back to a little bit of what you said, higher consciousness, John, that's what you feel the message of these ETs are. How do you know that? And how can we get that to be said publicly?
Well, I know that personally. And and then in communicating with like Jim Semivan, my CIA colleague,
right,
he knows that as well. And then, communicating with my colleagues that I worked with when I was employed by CIA, they know that as well. And like I've said before, there are a lot of people who are experiencers within government, and they need a place to share those experiences. Now, one thing I was happy about is some of the congressmen did talk about the ability to share within government. And there is within government, and Chris Mellon stated it, so I'll follow on. The ODNI has set up a chat room and that's still top secret SCI, but it allows these people in the intelligence community, especially civilian side intelligence community, to share their experiences, to share their beliefs of what happened or what is happening, and maybe share information that might be classified. So the ODNI does have this chat room database. However, the Air Force has been calling through this database and finding Air Force people, civilians, or even military, and intimidating them. And that's completely wrong.
Well, it's against the law, even according to the what Congress put out about stigma and
right.
How does the Air Force get away with doing that when they're breaking the law?
That's one of the questions Chris Mellon queued up in a piece that he wrote. Here's what I would ask if I was a congressman. He queued up a lot of questions that he wants answers to, because he knows the answers, but he wanted the questions to be spoken out loud.
Right.
And so they touched on some of it, but not all of it, and probably not in this very first hearing. But yeah, what they're doing within the Air Force, they're protecting programs. So why is the Navy more forthcoming than the Air Force? And I've always said the Navy has the data, but if you go back to Roswell, what was retrieved went to the Army Air Force before it became the Air Force. And they've had this material since then and may have exploited it to the point where they now incorporated some of that technology into craft that they have built, and they want to protect that program. And so opening up all of UFO, all of UAPs to the general public might then expose some of the things we see or have been seen might be their craft, and not craft of non-human origin, and they want to protect their craft. And I happen to know that there is such craft, and see people call it TR3B, manta, black manta. But I tell people, step away from all of these labels that you hear in social media, you hear on UFO Twitter. Step away from the label and ask, does the Air Force have an advanced aerospace vehicle based on advanced technology that may have been recovered? Right. Simple question. I'm not saying what it's called. And if they were truthful, they will say, yes, we do. You know, but if you ask the Air Force, do you have a TR3B black manta? They'll say, no, we don't have that, because that's not what it's called. You ask the government, is there a Majestic 12? They'll say, no, we don't have that, because that's not what it's called. The government literally will answer your question and give you a literal answer based on your question. And if there's something that they can't talk about, they just say, I can't talk about it, which is like a yes. You know, when they go to closed session, which means classified session, and they say, I can't talk about it, we have to go to closed session. It's basically just say yes. That's basically a yes from them, that they can't disclose it publicly, but yes, but we can talk about it, you know, offline, you know, in that closed session. So
right. Well, Zinka, I have a lot more questions for John. How much time do you have, John? Because
whenever you shut down, I'll shut down.
I could talk to you all day, because what you're saying is so valuable for what people really want to hear. So, I mean, my question is, it seems if you're saying there's higher intelligence that is wanting us to wake up, and there's forces inside the government that doesn't want that to happen, it seems like we are in a battle of sorts between, I don't want to say light and dark, but whatever, there's some kind of internal, even intellectual battle going on within the public that is keeping us dumb and stupid and ignorant. And what do we need to do to gain the force and the energy to come forward with this? Well, I'll just show you what we're doing. Me and Deborah Giusti, we're putting on this 5-part series here that's coming up. You can go to Making Contact series. We're going to be talking to Nick Pope and JJ and Desiree Hertog this Thursday. So, and then I'm talking to Danny Sheehan and Steve Bassett on June 2nd, and Carolyn Corey June 9th, and Whitley Strieber and Linda Moulton Howe on June 16th. So it's the first session's free, and I just say this is another way of going in. But also, what you're saying here, John, is what is the real battle? This is a battle for the soul of humanity, and how do we change it? I mean, it's so frustrating to hear all these bureaucratic, I don't know, talking points that don't ever get to the truth.
Right. And so that's the value of having legislation, both in the NDAA and the IAA. Because there are these two pieces of signed legislation, now we, the voters, when there is a candidate for office, let's say a congressperson wants to be reelected, or a new candidate wants to run for office, then the press and we, the people, can ask them, oh, by the way, there's this NDAA, and there's a UAP section in that. What do you feel about that? That's no longer considered crazy. Mm-hmm. You can legitimately ask that. The press, the media can ask that question of these candidates, of these incumbents. What do you feel about this? And at least start that discussion. That's the very first step of trying to get people of that mind into office, so we can have that greater discussion coming forward. That's one way of doing it. And another way is because the stigma is removed from the military and from the intelligence community, then the stigma should also be removed from the corporate world, the world that many people work in, you know, where they don't want to talk about this in the workplace because they're fear for, you know, what people might think of them. But if the conversation happens on that level, all of a sudden that now we can start talking about what we're seeing and also what we're experiencing and what we're feeling.
Right.
And so all these steps need to happen. And so, yeah, I was disappointed with today, but I didn't expect, everything to come out.
But we do have Andre Carson in there. We have Tim Burchett. We have that guy Gallagher. There are people in office. But, and then Zinka, yeah, I know you want to ask. I just want to say corporate, when you mention corporate, it seems like corporate interests are in control because obviously what's ever out there is not filling up their gas tank to get here. And that's a threat to corporate monopolies. So, yeah. That's the problem. Zinka, yeah.
Well, that's a very interesting point, Alan, because if everything boils down to economics and at a core level, when you talk about politics and things and decision making like that, that's some people are saying that's why they haven't been more forthcoming about this information, because free energy is baked into the whole story, the whole technology. So that's an interesting way to think about it. I would also encourage us to realize that the government is a microcosm of our society, okay, at a global level and a country level. So if there's people in the government that, as you say, don't want to talk about enlightenment and channeling because they think it's negative entities, that's a part of us that's not ready to get curious. And that's the thing. It's all of these thoughts and beliefs and systems take time to die and rebirth. And I think one of the flags that we can carry as a movement is this idea that, hey, let's get curious about this. We don't have all the answers. But if you're saying, no, I can't listen to that because it's evil or this or that, then you're not being curious. And I would also encourage, the mission of LightNet is to really get people to have these first experiences, because when you see that UFO, you cannot deny that you saw that UFO, and it suddenly becomes a totally different discussion for you. So if you, and we know that people who've seen UFOs or done channeling or done meditations or remembered their dreams are good at helping other people do it. So that's what we're doing at lightnet.org is on Thursday, we're launching these small groups of 8 to lovingly bring. So if it doesn't even have to be through our platform. If you know how to see a UFO, show someone else how to do it. If you know how to remember your dreams, encourage someone to do it. We dream a third of the time, and scientists are saying that a lot of these answers to our questions are coming through dreams, right? So if this is interdimensional, if this is consciousness, then when your waking mind, the one that's behind is asleep, you're a little bit freer to start to understand these things in a different way. So yeah, I think, we really need to think of this as kind of like a chessboard, and the government is us and we're the society, and it's one conversation at a time. It's one experience at a time. And thanks to Alan for putting on the Making Contact series. Thanks for, Dwayne, I'll share my screen. Dwayne is going to be releasing, we're talking about different footage that we want to see. So on the Blind Frog Ranch, which is close to the Skinwalker Ranch, they're having a massive UFO disclosure symposium because they've got amazing footage that's never been seen before. And they've actually gotten mainstream press to come and to cover the event. So again, this is all one thing is dominoing into the other. And, they've got Avi Loeb coming, so we've got, Harvard professors jumping into the mix, which is totally amazing. So again, also, we'd love to have you up in Contact 2022. John, Alan and I are going to be speaking. It's up here in Sedona. It's not going to be done live. But yeah, this stuff is happening. And I see Deborah here. I don't know, Deborah, if you want to talk about what you're working on, but these things are so important, that what we're doing as citizens to keep the word out and to keep the knowledge going. And I think we really need centralized systems to unite all these UFO organizations so that we can be a more organized front of
A people's
invitation into
movement.
experience.
Yes.
Invitation into experience, and also show the data, the statistics, which is what they seem to want. Hey,
I want to
Deborah.
introduce people to Deborah Giusti, who is co-producing the Making Contact series and has been a driving force in getting this public. Deborah, you want to just jump in about, and wait, unmute. We don't want to miss anything.
I think this is amazing. And John, that was incredible, explanation of all that's going on and way beyond and all what we need to know right now. And I think the biggest thing is that we're all coming together. So many people around the world are shouting out now, and that's going to be heard. That can't be denied. And it's not just the people that know about the UFOs, it's everybody is waking up on all levels, and not just to UFO consciousness, but to their own personal evolution, to everything that's going on the planet, to everything that's going on behind the scenes that is now coming up to be revealed, healed, exposed, and transformed. So this is a part of everything that's moving forward now. And I'm so happy to be working with Alan. I've known him for many, many years. I mean, we've all been connected, but now we're in deeper and deeper collaboration, directed by Spirit to come out and do what we came here to do. And this time right now it's getting all the information out, like all of us are compelled to do these online programs and get the information out. So I think it's really beautiful. And even though it wasn't the big wow, there was a lot of good questions that were asked. And there's people there, you could tell they knew what was going on. The other people knew it was going on. You could see all that behind the scenes, So even though it's not on the surface right now, it's percolating up and it can't be denied on all levels. So it's all part of the transformation, the shift that's happening now that we all came from at this point.
Well, thank you, Deborah. It's great working with you because you're so enthusiastic, and we are on a threshold of something. This at least was an opening of a door. And John, thank you for coming forward, with your background and your awareness. We need to hear from more people like you and brave enough to just say the truth. And one thing I was interested in what you did say is that there's a private chat inside government for experiences that come forward. Are you a part of that? And can you share? You're not.
Okay. No, I can share. It was set up by Abraham.
Right.
So the ODNI, the DNI set it up, and it is classified top secret SCI. I no longer hold clearances. And so you have to access it through a government computer in a SCIF. So obviously I won't be able to access it, but the fact of that such a thing exists, I've known about. And I'm happy for Chris Mellon to actually reveal the fact that there is this chat room. It's basically you classified national a national classified database for intelligence officers. It's a classified UFO Twitter. Basically, it's what it is. But people are able to then have a venue to share their experiences within the government. So there is not stigma. So within the government, that's very helpful. And maybe then, and I'm encouraging people that I know who have retired and who are experiences to come forward as well. There's a way to do it. And there's a way, that you can put things in a slideshow presentation or give a talk. Just run it through CIA has never, ever redacted anything. And I've had like 3 versions of what I've been saying that CIA has approved.
Wow. And
so it's not like they're trying to suppress me from saying anything. Jim Semivan can talk about what he talks about because he went through the same process. James Lukatsky, who wrote the Skinwalkers of the Pentagon book, went through that process. And I'm sure Lou Elizondo, who is writing a book as we speak, is going to go through that process. And I think there are elements within the intelligence community that want this to happen in a way that that protects sources and methods. That's a legitimate concern.
What can you explain what that actually means? That people use that, but I don't know what that means. Sources and methods.
Sure. A source is where and what we get information from. It could be a person or a technical device. That's a source. And we say the source is highly perishable, especially if it is a human source, a person. Because if a country briefs like a handful of people on a secret program that country's doing, and that information is released, then that country's counterintelligence can go down the list and say, okay, who do we brief? And they can go right down this list and interrogate them in a not very nice way. And it could result in their death. So we need to protect sources of information. We need to protect the fact that we may have a device, technical device that's collecting information behind the scenes in a foreign government. Because if that's discovered, then we lose that source of information. So that's protecting source. The method is the technical means how we extract that information from a very remote site. So if it's a gadget and country X, and the country X is very authoritarian, and it's what we call a hard target, hard to get into, hard to penetrate, we may have an agent who, for whatever motivation, will agree to place that device in that sensitive area.
Right.
So that's a source who we work with, and that device is a source from which we gather information. And how that source talks back to us, how do we retrieve that information that's being collected by that gadget? That's the method. And once that method is exposed, we can never use it again.
Right.
So that's sources and methods. So it's not just UAP related. It's I think one of the witnesses said truthfully that we use these sources and methods to collect just intelligence data worldwide, and so we can't reveal how what sensors may have picked up more than the disappointing handheld videos that we saw out of a cockpit. There's instrumented data that we have that they can't reveal, because that same instrumented data that might be flying on a satellite or flying on an airplane, looking into a country, that's the same way that we collect information.
Right.
So they can't compromise that.
So how much do you think Avril Haines knows, head of the intelligence, DNI, government agency, I guess, and how much, and what do you, and it's a two-part question, is like, are there people behind the scenes, whatever, subcommittee, saying, should we tell them? No, we shouldn't. I mean, I know there's the religious, kind of impingement, but is that conversation happening? You think, let's tell them, let's not tell them. It's just frustrating how much people know and want to say. Yeah, go ahead. Yes.
To address your first question, Avril
Yes.
Haines knows everything.
Wow.
There is a myth that for certain things the president is not told. That is a myth. When the president asks a question he wants answered, or she wants answered, the federal executive branch of government will answer that question. And so the question needs to be asked, and
Right.
the government will answer that question. The executive branch of government will. She knows a lot more than what she says. In fact, she hinted when she said the word extraterrestrially, right there is a hint that she knows something, that it's not adversarial.
Well, it could be adversarial if it's extraterrestrial. It could be an adversary.
It could be, but it could be adversarial, but not terrestrially adversarial. It's not China or Russia.
Right.
I've made that statement plain, as Jim Semivan, who actually knows the answer.
Yeah.
I know from a perspective of having been retired for 13 years, that what we saw in the orbs didn't come from Russia and China. We
Right.
eliminated that right away. It's not terrestrial technology. Avril Haines knows, and the clue of what she knows is to go back to the public statements of her predecessors, the former directors of CIA, and also the former DNI that preceded her, saying that, oh yeah, we have all kinds of satellite data, we have all kinds of collected data. If you go back to Helen Carter, who was the first director of Central Intelligence, he gave an interview to the New York Times in February of 1960. And he called the Air Force to task, saying the Air Force is hiding all of this information. about the true origins of UFOs. And it's high time that Congress holds hearings about the true origins of UFOs. There's no reason for this secrecy. And Helen Carter was the DCI when Roswell happened. He ran the Central Intelligence Group, which became the Central Intelligence Agency. He was the top official in the US government when Roswell happened, and he knows, and even back in 1960, he made those statements. And so you can imagine then that Avril Haines, the current DNI, would have that information, would have that knowledge.
Right.
And the second part of your question was,
Is
about factions that are going on.
Yes.
My belief is that the faction that wants to suppress this information for whatever reason, whether it's like mundane, like economic reasons, socioeconomic, or geopolitical reasons, or if it's a personally held religious belief, I can almost feel them. Like their fingernails are just scraping down the wall. They're losing traction. They're going to lose. They know it, and they're scrambling now. So what do we do now? Oh my gosh, Congress just held a hearing on this, and they know that they're basically going to be superseded and left behind. Yeah. And I think in the future, as more of these hearings come forward, that will go away. I mean, that they're going to disappear. So I have that hope.
Wow.
Within the government, I was just going to ask John, within the government, how compartmentalized is the intelligence that's being gathered? Who has access to what? What did they allude to today that made us think that there's any interdepartmental sharing? Is there a central database or not? How does it work exactly? Or is it just levels of clearances? Or is everything siloed between the different departments?
Right. Silos are a good way to think of them. We call them stovepipes in the government. They're stovepipes of information. First of all, I want to dispel the myth that there's really nothing above top secret. Top secret is the highest classification in the US government. But having said that, to your point, Zinka, there are stovepipes, and some of these pipes are really, really big. And so a lot of people are briefed into that type of information under that compartment. But something like UFOs and UAPs might be like a soda straw compared to a giant chimney. So it's a soda straw. And because it's so narrow, these people have top secret SCI, which means that you're eligible to be read in if it's part of your job to deal with the subject matter. You have top secret SCI, you've been vetted, you took a polygraph, we know that you're not spying against the US, you're completely trustworthy. Oh, it's your job to look into this. We can read you into that really narrow compartment. And there might be like hundreds of people, it might be a few thousand, but it might sound like a lot of people, but if you look at the entire federal government and the entire military, it is really a soda straw. And so it is managed. And certain programs are SAPs, special access programs. They're military. So SAPs tend to be military, and they tend to protect military hardware, military plans and intentions in SAPs. CIA has CAPS, and they mention CAPS. There are controlled access programs. And so it's just different terminology, but it's the same thing. It's like really narrowly restricted. And CAPS in the CIA tend to be broader collection programs, working with technology or working with governments that we don't acknowledge. And so those are like controlled access programs, and they're literally have something called a bigot list. It's a bad choice of words, but it's very stark in the sense that it really isolates people by name of who can have that information. Now, I've revealed before, and CIA doesn't mind me revealing, I was in a CAP dealing with the People's Republic of China, where CIA had a relationship, intelligence sharing with the People's Republic of China during a time when the Chinese were supposed to be our adversaries. But behind the scenes, we were working with them because we're going after a target of mutual benefit to both countries, the US and China. That's the Soviet Union. So we did establish collection facilities in China with our partner NSA and staffed them with CIA officers working with my counterparts in the Chinese intelligence. So here we are at one level competing as adversaries and another level cooperating as friends. And so that might be protected in the cap. And there was a bigot list, and I had access to that bigot. I was the control officer very briefly for this bigot list, and inside was like names of presidents going back to Jimmy Carter, their birthdays and social security number and birthplace. So I had the social security numbers of presidents. And there's me right there, John Ramirez. I had my birthplace, Yokohama, Japan, had my social security number and date of birth, July 14th, 1953. So I was in that list, and there were only like several hundred people in that list. And to the Davis-Wilson memo,
Yeah.
you know who I didn't see on that list? A lot of DIA people. They weren't
Why
on
is
that
that?
list because it's a CIA program, not a DIA program. So here's another example of having a soda straw into CIA, having a very highly compartmented program at the time, and eliminating other parts of the government. Now, projecting it to the UAP, it's probably the same thing, where there's a soda straw of information in which a lot of the real UFO UAP data goes into, including, whether we've had contact with these entities. That might be in there. If other governments have had contact, that might be in there. What do we know about them? Where did they come from? That might be in there. And what are we doing to address this? That might be in there. And it might be a very limited number of people. So even within the DNI or CIA or any of these intelligence agencies, not everyone is read into that program. So it's so narrow. And so there are people in there that might be like managing the narrative out there. The people I allude to as losing control, they might be in there as well as people who want to be more forthcoming about this information.
So you talked about this idea, I just watched that movie at Alan's request of the men watching goats, and it talked about the New Earth Army, brigade within the US Army that was looking at the more psychological, more Enlightenment terms. So my question is there, who's doing that research now? Like the Monroe Institute, is there nothing in the US government? Obviously there would be. And where is that? And also, where would you place the flip side of all this? Like if we all know that they're not a threat, then what governmental agency is should be moving forward with more diplomacy or cultural, study or whatever?
Yeah.
So the first question is, does the astral travel and channeling and all that stuff exist as a research within the government? And if so, where? And where would you place this kind of research going forward?
That's right. There was a concept of a New Earth Battalion and having monk warriors. The person I know would be Colonel John Alexander. He is like a monk warrior in that sense. He is a person who will talk about higher consciousness, and he has briefed the Association of Former Intelligence Officers about his experiences with UFOs and what he's discovered within the intelligence community to these former retired, intelligence officers in I think it was a luncheon speech he gave in 2013. And I'm trying to work with I try to get like some semblance of that and trying to contact John Alexander about that. So it did exist. Having said that, on the CIA side, it was all about this higher consciousness, about developing human potential. And of course the Pentagon says super soldiers, but what we wanted were super spies, not super soldiers. We wanted people who could use these either acquired or given gifts to work with the intelligence community, to do the intelligence community mission. And the remote viewing program still exists, but it's been all outsourced outward to private entities. And so we have former remote viewers who set up programs or are associated with other institutes to continue this, and then the government can then tap into.
Like who?
For example, Joe McMoneagle, Lynn Buchanan. I think there's and I met him at Laughlin, Nevada. Unfortunately, I can't think of his name right now. His first name is Paul Smith. Paul Smith, he's up in Utah. These are military remote viewers who are working this issue, and there might be others I don't know. But they're out there working for Moreau Institute, the Farsight Institute. There's the Universal Light Center in Black Mountain, North Carolina. Paul Smith's organization as well. They're doing this on behalf of the government. And I don't know if the government still has a remote viewing program within government that's funded by taxpayer dollars. But I do know the remote viewing activity is still ongoing. And that was your first question. You asked several more.
And the second one is so if I mean, I was sort of flabbergasted by how military sounding this is. Like, if, it's like, well, we all know that aliens are among us, and this is much more dimensional and complex than we ever realized. But if, our instinct, is like, oh, let's figure out if they're a threat. It's like, well, let's figure out if we should, let's welcome them. You know what I mean? So who would be on that committee? What departmental, what departmental group would be on that?
Well, that's an easy answer, because diplomacy in the United States government happens within the Department of State. They're responsible for that. Also, I would say United Nations, the Outer Space Office in the United Nations are responsible for that. So it would be State Department and the UN. Diplomacy is done in these organizations.
But is that happening? Is anyone read into, like, hey, there might be this State Department or diplomacy act with these beings? Has that happened at all?
I'm not sure about State Department, but it would be in the Intelligence and Research Bureau of the State Department. If still have, we call it IN for intelligence, R for research. There was a bureau like that, and I haven't seen a State Department organization chart that would still have that in there. I don't know. But I'll also say that going towards citizen science, there's also citizen diplomacy. There's efforts to establish an ET embassy, some way of establishing a place where these other higher consciousness beings or other, I call them ultra-terrestrials, who are already here, to come and make some kind of contact, welcome them to make contact in a way that's not dealing with the government, in a sense. So I have high hopes for this ET embassy program, this concept of having a facility where this can happen.
Yeah, by the way, for those watching, it's the Alliance for the number 4 ET.org. And they're going to be doing a conference this year to talk about their efforts. They've raised multi-millions of dollars to build an embassy, and they've gotten a lot of traction within the UN and within countries who want to host the embassy. So it's Alliance for ET.org. And they're very, they're decades into this and very close to getting the Vienna Convention, discussed and ratified. So that's, we talk about, I used to study influencers, and I used to track their Facebooks and their YouTubes and to see what was happening. And the people that were spiking the most are the rock stars, right? Yeah. So here we are, like, all, panties up in a bunch about what the government said or not said or whatever, but really this is a cultural movement that has to be pushed by the artists, by the musicians, by the filmmakers, because I would track some of these important thinkers and researchers, and then the musicians would have millions and millions of followers. You know what I mean? So really, this is what we're all working toward. It's all a cultural mimetic piece by piece shift. And the embassy project is an idea that we can all get behind. That's like, or, you know, you just want to talk about it. You want to look at the UFO pool and you want to see how the architecture is so amazing. So the more we can do to rally behind their conference and their work and this idea, and just literally writing to the United Nations, writing to your local government saying, I want the embassy to be here. This is what it takes. It takes us not just watching, it takes us doing. And it's in conversations, it's in songs, it's in writing. It's like I said, I would encourage everyone to tweet to these congressmen who showed up, got there, asked questions, Mr. LaHood, Mr. Welch, Mr. Himes, Mr. Gallagher, you know, and tell them, thanks for showing up. Thanks for pushing this forward.
Right. Hey, yeah, no, that's great. You're absolutely right. This is a cultural phenomenon, and that's why it's up to us to really present to the public what we feel the inside information is, what our experiences are. And that's why I'll be interviewing Danny Sheehan and Steve Bassett and Nick Pope. Maybe we can have you come on, John, or maybe I could do a separate show with you and Jim Semivan, who I had about an hour and a half conversation with. He was very open, very forthcoming, and be good to go into the CIA and bring out this. This is knowledge for the Earth, for our evolution. So, this is my upcoming conference. Thanks, Zinka. This is making contact. It's starting this Thursday with Nick Pope and JJ Hertog and Desiree Hertog, and then we go to Danny Sheehan. I don't want to just make this a commercial, because what I think is we need to keep these discussions going on many, many levels. So yeah, this is the
embassy, by the way. They're doing a conference in 142 days.
Yes, I'll be.
And
yes,
it's amazing what they're doing. It's totally great.
Oh, it's there. I'm speaking there. Are you speaking there, Zinka? Preston Dennett? These are some of the.
It's going to be a one-day conference, you know, so they're going to have, you know, they're not going to have, you know, too many speakers, but they're going to reveal, you know, they're doing like virtual reality of how the embassy is going to look and things like that, you know, so it's okay.
But I think we need to talk about what John is saying. This is about higher consciousness. This is about evolution, and it's governments, I feel, are in the way of this evolutionary process because they want to keep a cap on it. It's like the church saying, no, the earth is the center of the universe and that's all there is to it. It's so.
But to be fair, this is a mind trip. This is like a backflip. You know,
what is a backflip?
To realize that we're living in a multi-dimensional reality gated by frequencies that our third eye and telepathy can say. I mean, it's like, this is a lot.
This is like, huge.
wow.
Actually, I'm going to send you a copy of my book or a PDF, John, okay? Because my Making Contact book goes into ultra-terrestrials, these higher dimensional presences that are trying to lift us up out of our ignorance, and we are being kept ignorant.
When did you come to that conclusion, John, that we were living in a multi-dimensional reality that was like, you know, like,
let me put in a plug, Zinka, I'll put in a plug for Exo Metaverse. As you know, I was a guest on Exo Metaverse with Nadi Hana. And I related a lot of my experiences, and I've talked about experiences, but I'm a lifelong experiencer. And so, you know, it came to me naturally, starting at age 4 and going forward. People who see my interviews, particularly more of the higher consciousness interviews and not the nuts and bolts UFO, UAP craft interviews that most of the interviews want. But I did a few for Quantum Witch Cafe, witch spelled with a Y instead of an I, and Savita Starseed. And they're on YouTube, where I talked about the higher consciousness aspect and more of my experiences. Alan, I was in, this is before anyone knew who I was. I was in the Making Contact Convergence
Oh, good.
last year,
Yeah.
and I got your book.
Oh.
I thank you very much. I did get it as a VIP participant.
Oh, did you read it? Did you have a chance to read some of it?
I've got so many books to read right now.
Okay.
I'm working on, like, I'm a very slow reader, so I am working on it.
Well, when you get a chance, it's chapters by different experts in the field. So chapter 3 is by J.J. Hurtak and Desiree Hurtak, who talk about the ultra-terrestrials.
Mhm.
And maybe we should do a program with you and Jim Semivan about the CIA and experiencers within the CIA. Would that be something you would be wanting to participate in?
Sure, if Jim is willing to go on, and in fact, as you know, George Knapp had Jim and I on
Oh.
to host, but George had us separate, and Jim and I wanted George to have us together.
Yeah, I will put you together.
Yeah,
Because
yeah, because
Jim, I couldn't believe what a great guy Jim was. How
He is.
open and and curious, and you know, both of you guys are seeing the bigger picture here that the government somehow is not seeing. Do you feel like this is the end of this disconnected rulership that's in place, because it's not letting us? It feels like, you know, what the revolution was, that what was it, representation without you know, not,
taxation.
yeah, not representing the will of the people. These are, government is working for us. We the people, and they are now preventing people from understanding their own democratic rights for freedom. And so, not to put you in conspiracy, but do you think it's the end, or could mark the end of government as we know it? And I'm not saying this, I think we do need governing policies, but the way it's gotten so complex and so segmented, it seems like a dinosaur. What do you think?
Yeah, I talked about that in my interview, going through the history of why it's secret. In 1947, in January 1946, Truman, after he was briefed on a lot of the technology that the Germans held, decided to create the Central Intelligence Group and the National Intelligence Authority, and that was in operation at the time of Roswell. And when Roswell happened, before Roswell happened, it was already thought that they would make the CIG into a CIA and create the what became the Department of Defense. In 1948, roughly a year after Roswell, there was a bill passed through Congress that allowed corporate world, the defense contractors, to become defense contractors. It enabled black project programs. It enabled sole source contracting, non-competitive practices amongst these contractors, and enabled black projects and budgets. And that started the national security military industrial complex. So previously, when Truman created the Central Intelligence Group under the National Intelligence Authority, that was the first time we had a true national security state. And then the military industrial complex occurred in 1948 when this law was passed that allowed these carve outs. The law is very interesting. It says, you know, that competition between among contractors the government will do business with should be open, except for, and the except for is where the everything in the UFO UAP is happening, where all the exploitation of technology and so forth. It allows these black budgets to occur legally, and there have been other laws since then. Most notably, Executive Order 13526, signed by President Obama, which further strengthened the ability to carve out these unacknowledged SAPs. So Obama allowed unacknowledged SAPs to occur.
Why would he do that?
I don't know. I do not know. So, you know, executive order, that's not law. That's not US law, but it's based on US law. So people say, well, these things are unconstitutional, illegal. I counter with, no, they're not illegal because Congress passed laws. Our representative passed these laws signed by the president. And so in that sense, it's legal. The question to ask is it constitutional? And no one's ever challenged the constitutionality of some of these more draconian legislation that occurred that enables that faction to keep control. No one's gone before and said, I'm going to go through the federal courts and end up at the Supreme Court because I think this is unconstitutional. That hasn't happened yet. And that Danny Sheehan, being a lawyer, he would probably be a better person to answer why that hasn't occurred, or why hasn't anyone challenged these carve-outs, these unacknowledged SAFs from being.
I'm going to ask Danny that question, and maybe you could join.
Yeah, if you reference Executive Order 13526 and the carve-outs allowed in that executive order, that might be an interesting answer.
Well, maybe you could join us for part of that program. That's the June 2nd program on the Making Contact series, but I will reach out. Zinka, did you have something else to say? Because
Oh no, I mean, I think the issue is, it's like, so we need to get the information first shared within government so that these lower, less, high security people are getting some of these crumbs, these breadcrumbs, right? And that there's not this highly curated list of only 200 people or less in these tiny, straws, you know what I mean? So the more that all can open up, and then the more that the pop culture and the demand is here, the faster this is all going to go.
Yeah. And one more question, and thank you for your time, John. And you've been such a valuable resource because we just, I'm not familiar with government. I try to avoid it. And, you're inside, you can dissect it in a much clearer way and help people understand what we just saw and what we didn't just see, so. But how big is the experiencer community within government? I mean, of course, there's no way of knowing, but what's your guess? Like, how many people in Congress and government and military, percentage-wise, you think are directly connected to this phenomena?
Honestly, I don't know the answer to that question. I just know that I've spoken personally with many colleagues in other agencies and within CIA. And when I get to know them, and we talk about our hobbies and whatnot, and I mentioned that, I go to UFO conferences, and then that opens up that avenue of discussion. And in fact, I think it was Mr. Moultrie who talked about, oh yeah, I went to these conferences.
Sci-fi conferences.
So, that's an indication that here was this gentleman. I know where he worked at CIA, and I know what his professional job was at CIA.
Moultrie, you knew Moultrie at CIA?
I don't know him personally, but I knew what he did.
Oh, he was CIA Moultrie.
He was originally, I think he was Naval Intelligence, then went into CIA in the information operations and information warfare areas of CIA. And I can reveal that it was something called the Clandestine Information Technology Office, and the Information Operations Center. And then from there, he went to NSA in the SIGINT Directorate, and then he ran the National Security Operations Center, the NSA watch office, if you will, for 24/7, every second of every day. They're taking in all of this SIGINT data from all of these sensors that the U.S. government has, and then parsing it out. And that's his background before he was appointed to be the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security. And so even at that level, he says, I've been to UFO conferences. And Jim Semivan, when he shared his experiences at CIA, and he was told, oh, you should talk to this other officer. He goes to UFO conferences, and it wasn't me, it was someone else. And I went to UFO conferences with my good friend together. And so, I mean, there's a lot of interest there. And I was an administrator of a discussion database called the users group, was mostly about technology and the application of technology. This is in the 90s, you know, when the internet was nascent and people were home building their own computers, and that was that unofficial database. And I took the opportunity as administrator to bring up some of these topics, like remote viewing and UFOs and artifacts, anomalies on the moon and Mars. And that's when I got a deluge of phone calls and emails to me privately about what they knew. So I knew that, you know, there was a lot of interest in remote viewing, that it was a real program, that we have encountered craft. That one gentleman who was a Navy officer before joining CIA said, yes, I was on a cruiser, USS Boston, in the off of the North Vietnamese coast, and we were fighting off this UFO. You know, and so, you know, I mean, all these little bits and pieces of information come, and people are talking about the Anunnaki and, you know, Sidonia. I mean, all of this coming through within CIA, which unfortunately is not FOIable because it's not an official document that can be FOIA'd. And so in that sense, I knew that there was a lot of interest of just me personally contacting these folks who were also had interests, who might have been hobbyists. And during my security reinvestigations that were occurred every 5 years, the first one occurred after 3 years, and then every 5 years since. They would ask me, Mr. Ramirez, what are your hobbies? And I go, I'm interested in researching UFOs and going to ET conferences. And I'm a big fan of Coast to Coast AM with George. That time it was with Arbel, and, you know, they would just dutifully write it down. There was no like, what? You know, none of that. You know, just write it down. Okay. You know. And there's Chase Brandon, who wrote his novel, Crypto's Conundrum. Chase Brandon wrote about this higher consciousness aspect of everything, and him having familiarity with the topic because he saw the actual Roswell files of CIA. It's the only CIA officer that actually stated in public, yes, there are Roswell files. Yes, I saw them. Yes, there was a craft that was non-terrestrial. That looked non-terrestrial, and yes, there were beings recovered because you saw the pictures of the bodies that were not human. And here's an officer that said, well, I can't reveal this outright, I'll make it a novel. And he was interviewed by George Nuri, and then he said, you know, read my novel, it's all in there, it's read behind the lines. What I wrote in the novel, some of that will be disclosed in the future. And one of the things he disclosed was the fact that the Navy has encountered these craft under the water with submarines and through aircraft flying off of aircraft carriers. This is when no one knew about Tic Tac. No one knew about Tic Tac until 2017. But he wrote this while just as he retired from CIA, and put it all in there about this long-standing investigation and interest in UFOs. And the higher consciousness aspect, that sometimes we collect gifts when they're recovered. And he mentioned a crystal gift that the government has that, you know, that when you connect with it, reveals like our past history.
Wow.
So, I mean, he wrote it all in there. And so.
What's the book called again?
Crypto's Conundrum.
Okay.
Hey, you know, I'm glad you're recording this because we just got disconnected from YouTube there, Zinka, for some reason. So, I mean, it's interesting they cut it off just as John was getting to the really good, juicy stuff there. So,
I've been checking, so it must have been recent.
We lost the YouTube stream, but John, and you say like there's been some ship battling these UFOs, there must be a record of that, right? There must be some deep
yes, we're live on YouTube.
Oh no, it's okay. We'll go back to that. Wait, go back to that. No, it's okay. But let me just ask the question. And then when you say, can't the government petition the CIA for those Roswell records and just say, okay, we want to see them? I mean, I'm just saying there's stuff that's recorded behind the scenes that someone inside the government could petition, and that's not a national security threat. That's history. So.
Right, and internally, they probably do have access within that little straw compartment.
But can't they ask for that publicly to be shared?
FOIA them, I guess. I don't know. I guess you can FOIA them. Um, I don't, they may have moved them. I don't know.
Right.
Because once Chase said, I saw them in the Historical Intelligence Collection, the HIC, that clued CIA into saying, oh, we need to go find them and hide them. So I don't know. I don't know if they're findable. I don't think they're owned by CIA. I think they're owned by the Air Force, and CIA acquired them.
Wow. Well, we can go on and on. I mean, this is so great. Definitely want to have you back, me and Zinka, and maybe we'll invite Jim to come on. We'll do a whole planned programming about inside the CIA. And I mean, I think it's great. I've never heard you talk about the higher intelligence aspect, but that is what's behind all this. And that's who we are. This is what I'm trying to put out. Like, we are connected to something bigger. And why are we being kept in the dark about who we really are? I mean, that's actually, to be blunt, a crime against humanity.
Mhm.
And it's unfortunate that there are forces in the way that are stopping us from our evolutionary destiny, in a way, to be part of this greater community. So thank
Yeah,
you
and I would just say, like, we're doing this to ourselves. So the government doesn't run our lives. They're not the only ones we can count on. We have to come together and do this ourselves. We can all remote view. You know, Alan, you're teaching it in classes.
I
I can't
am.
you could put it on LightNet. We're not victims. We're the heroes, and we're bringing this forward. And nobody can stop us. There's you know what I mean? Like, it's time. It's time. So we all have bodies, and we all have minds, and we all have mouths, and we all have emails, and we all have internet. So let's do this, let's do
Right.
this.
Are you located out west, John? I mean,
I'm in, actually, I'm in Arizona. So I woke up very early this morning to catch that 6
we
a.m.
did too.
Yeah, yeah. I'm in Oro Valley, Arizona, which is just north of Tucson, by I believe about 14 miles north of Tucson.
Oh, great. So maybe if we do a conference up here, a disclosure conference, maybe next year, even Suzanne Ross, she's putting together a conference, we'll invite you for sure. But
Yeah, this weekend, party at my house on Friday
oh
after
yeah,
we
you can come up
after
with
our
that.
class. But anyway.
But even next year we'll plan, well, definitely anytime, John. But yeah, I just want to give one more little plug for this series that I'm doing here, Making Contact Series.com. And it's going to be deep dive. What we heard today is just the kind of beginning steps of what I want to go into with Linda Moulton Howe, Whitley Strieber, Danny Sheehan, Nick Pope, Steve Bassett, who's a lobbyist for UFO disclosure, and some experiencers, Marina Sarin, Adam Apollo, Mary Rodwell, who's been investigating the starseed aspect of this. So it's a multiple level phenomenon. This is not a simple, oh yeah, we're having visitors here. That famous Jacques Vallée line where he says, if I find out we're just having visitors from another planet, I'll be very disappointed, because there is a psychic phenomena, there's paranormal. Those are just words to describe another level of reality that we've been really kept from acknowledging. So this phenomena opens up a whole set of new worldviews and new aspects to the human mind. I say it makes us more human, this phenomena. So that's the excitement of where we're at. And today, you're right, Zinka, this was a kind of toe in the water.
Yes, it's to celebrate. This is all
Okay,
celebrations
I'm
on the
with you.
road to making this bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
Great. No, this
We're
is exciting.
moving forward.
John, your work is so valuable. Your insights and just adding to the conversation. We need to hear this from people like you, because otherwise it's just our little community talking to each other and saying, "Oh yeah, I saw something and this happened." But this makes it almost official, what you're adding here. So
Yeah. Thanks so much, John, for the work you've done in your life and who you are and who you've become, and your message to the world is so amazing. So
and
thank
there's more to talk about, and I do have a lot more questions, but it's been 3 hours now, so thank you.
you. Okay, guys.
I'm out of coffee.
And you're out of coffee. All right. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you,
Thank
Zinka.
you for having me.
Of
Okay.
course. Actually, can I
Well,
just say one thing? Me and Deborah Giusti are putting on a big 5-part series about this, and let me just show people. It is called the Making Contact series. This is happening starting Thursday, and this is a 5-part series here that we are doing on what we just heard, the truth behind what we do. Making Contact series. This is an investigation into what we hope will be the truth. The first episode is with Nick Pope and JJ and Desiree Hurtak, and then we're going to have Danny Sheehan and Steve Bassett on the June 2nd show. And then we're going to have a talk with Carolyn Corey and some of her technologies and covering UAPs. And then on June 16th, a show I'm really excited about is Whitley Strieber and Linda Moulton Howe. And then we're on June 23rd, we're going to have an experiencers panel with Marina Sarin, Kamara Jones, Adam Apollo, Mary Rodwell. So that's Making Contact series. We're going to go deeper, definitely, than we did today. So thanks for joining us all if you're watching, and see you soon. Thank you, everyone on the chat, too.